In the luxurious but cold space of the Forrester Creations conference room, the white light from the ceiling lamps fell on the long table, reflecting the tense faces of each person. After months of turmoil, the HFT product line, the pride of Forrester, now became a burden weighing heavily on Ridge and Steffy's shoulders. Losses, falling revenue reports, unfinished contracts like knives hanging over their heads, forcing them to make a life-or-death decision. All eyes in the room were on the two Forresters. One was the pillar of the old generation, the other was the embodiment of the new generation, and between them stood the figure of Hope Logan, who was on the verge of judgment. Ridge understood that a wrong decision could bring down the entire empire. But deep inside, there was something even more terrifying, that of destroying his own daughter's work. Steffi looked at her father, trying to remain calm, but her heart was in turmoil. She had believed HFD was a mistake from the start, that putting her trust in Hope had only made Forrester lose its identity. The product line might be profitable, but it had also created invisible cracks, a crack between the two families, Logan and Forrester, between emotion and reason, between the name Hope and everything she stood for. Hope sat at the end of the table, her face impossibly calm, but inside, her heart was pounding. She knew this meeting would not only decide the fate of HFT, but also her own future at Forrester. Every flip of paper, every look exchanged between Ridge and Steffi was like scissors cutting the threads that bound her to this family. She could clearly feel the line forming. On one side was Logan, on the other was Forrester, and she stood in the middle, no longer seen as a bridge, but an obstacle. Outside, the media was seething. Fashion magazines questioned whether Forrester was losing his way, whether Hope was still the golden face of the brand or just a worn-out icon. Rumors spread like wildfire that the HFT line would be cut, that Steffi wanted to clean up the Logan influence, that Ridge would choose family over ideology. The city waited for answers, and inside, the air was so thick it was hard to breathe. Steffi opened the report, her voice echoing in her head, not in words, but in the cold, rational mind of a leader. She knew she had to do something cruel to save her father's legacy, even if it meant ending the work of the woman who once called her friend. Ridge looked at his daughter, then at Hope, saw in her eyes a mix of hope and fear, a desire to prove herself and a hurt that had gone too long unacknowledged. He remembered the days when Hope had worked herself to exhaustion, trying to keep HFT afloat while everyone doubted her. But personal feelings cannot save a brand. And he understands. Today's decision will split this world in two. Hope looks up at Ridge, her hands clenched. She doesn't speak, but there is a final plea in her eyes, hoping that someone in this room still believes in her, believes in the value she creates. But the silence that answers is like a hammer blow. Ridge bows his head, Steffi looks straight. Everything stops at an endless moment, where Hope understands that she has been removed from the picture she once helped paint. When the decision is announced, the only sound is the clock on the wall ticking steadily, like the countdown of an era. HFT is cut, officially ended after many years of existence. The whole room falls into a soundless void. Hope still sits there, her face expressionless, but her eyes shine with something no one dares to name, not tears, but fire. The fire of someone pushed into a corner, someone with nothing left to lose. As everyone left, Hope remained, staring out the windows at the hazy Los Angeles sky. She remembered the times her mother, Brooke, had been pushed out of Forrester like this, the insults, the outsiders. And she knew that history was repeating itself, except this time, she wouldn't back down. In the empty office, Hope opened her laptop and looked at the design sketches she'd never sent. A line appeared at the top of the document. Logan's Studio. The idea she'd once dismissed now became her salvation. If Forrester no longer had a place for her, she'd create her own empire. But the move wasn't just a fresh start, it was a declaration of war. Because if she started Logan's Studio, everything would change. Clients, investors, even the Forresters who had supported her would be forced to choose sides. Ridge returned to his office, his heart heavy. He knew he had saved the company, but he had lost something more important. Trust. Steffi, though she had gotten what she wanted, was not at peace. She felt a strange void, as if by removing Hope she had awakened a rival more dangerous than anyone had ever known. In the days that followed, the market gradually recognized HFT's absence, but at the same time, a new wave emerged. Images of the Logan Studio logo began circulating online, accompanied by a cryptic declaration of a new chapter for women, creativity, and freedom. Fashion magazines reported, investors called, and in every meeting, Steffi heard Logan's name, a reminder that the fight wasn't over. It had just begun. Hope was no longer the soft girl who had begged for acceptance. Now she was the woman behind a fashion revolution. She no longer cried in the dark. She worked, planned, and waited. Every design she made carried anger, betrayal, and the belief that she deserved more than what others had decided. And then, that morning, Ridge saw the giant billboard in the middle of the city. Hope in a pure white dress, her eyes fixed on the camera, and the words Logan Studio, where vision begins. He knew immediately that this was not just a brand launch, but a declaration of war. Steffi pounded the table, but she herself felt a chill run down her spine. She realized that Hope was no longer the one who had once trembled for approval. She had become the enemy, one who knew Forrester's weaknesses better than anyone. Outside, the wind blew through the glass corridor, carrying the rustling of fabrics from old collections being taken down. The name HFT was now a memory. But amidst the ashes, a new fire burns, bright, fierce, and no one knows how many people it will consume before it dies out. And in the reflected light of the conference room mirror, Ridge, Steffi, and Hope appear like three pieces of the same broken mirror. 3 generations, 3 dreams, 3 ambitions that cannot coexist. The final question echoes in the cold space of that fashion empire. When Hope Logan becomes a rival to the very family that buried her, will this be the rebirth of a legend or the beginning of the inevitable downfall of Forrester Creations? On a foggy, overcast morning in Los Angeles, the glass building of Forrester Creations towers over the city like a temple of power. Inside, the seemingly quiet corridors are filled with the invisible sound of conflict, the slow pulse of an unexploded storm. The story begins when Steffi Forrester, the iron-hearted and fighting heiress of her father, is forced to give in for the first time in many years. The reason is not the market, nor the strategy, but a debt of life, a debt named Liam Spencer. He, who once belonged to both Logan and Forrester, saved her in a tragic accident in the middle of a rainy night, and since then, the line between hatred and gratitude in Steffi's heart has begun to crack. In the conference room with a pale yellow light reflected from the glass windows, Steffi sat motionless, her eyes as still as stone. She knew everyone was looking at her, waiting for a reaction, waiting for a decision, waiting to see what she would do with Hope Logan and the HFD product line that had become the focus of every battle between them. Over the past months, Steffi had tried to separate her emotions from her reason, to create a cold wall between the factions, but today, that wall began to show cracks. Because it was Hope who was related to Liam, and Liam was the reason why Steffi could no longer act on instinct. Hope entered the room, carrying a calm that was frightening. She did not speak, did not explain, just placed the HFD revenue report on the table and waited. The whole room fell into silence, only the sound of a pen tapping lightly on the desk of Ridge, the man sitting between 2 worlds, between 2 women he loved in different ways. Ridge knew that if he sided with Steffi, Hope would leave Forrester, and that departure would have a ripple effect. Not only would it cause the HFD line to collapse, but it would also cause a series of longtime partners to leave the firm. But if he chose to support Hope, he would lose the trust of his own daughter, who had carried Forrester with her soul and honor. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood that today's meeting was not just about fashion, but about power, about blood and family, about the survival of an empire. Steffi knew that if she just nodded to keep HFD, the meeting room would be temporarily quiet, but it would only be a false peace, like the calm surface of a lake with rising pressure at the bottom. Every decision, every signature today could be a detonator. She felt the pressure pressing down on her chest, as if every gaze in the room was piercing her skin. She remembered the night Liam saved her life, remembered his hand pulling her from the overturned car, remembered the look in his eyes when he said, "Don't let hatred kill you." Those words haunted her, making her unable to be as harsh as before. Hope, though silent, was fighting too. In her mind, all the memories of Forrester's humiliation of the Logan family resurfaced. She had vowed to prove that she didn't need anyone's backing, that her talent was worthy of standing alone, but in this moment, she understood that one wrong move would see her entire family removed from the board. HFT was more than a brand. It was a symbol of the Logan family's position in a world where they were always seen as outsiders. She looked at Ridge, who had protected her like a daughter, and saw the conflict in his eyes. She knew that if he chose Steffy, things would never be the same between them. Ridge raised his head, his eyes scanning the room, stopping on the two women sitting across from each other. He felt like he was caught between two storms, and with just the slightest movement, everything would collapse. A voice from the past echoed in him. Stephanie Forrester, her mother who had built this empire with blood, had said, "The Forresters live by uniting and fall by killing each other." Ridge knew that in this moment, that prophecy was coming true. Outside the conference room, the trees were being put up for the holiday season. Christmas music echoed faintly, a stark contrast to the cold silence inside. In that atmosphere, a decision was being made. Steffi opened her mouth, her voice hoarse but firm, not with hatred, but with exhaustion. She agreed to keep HFT, out of respect for Hope's work, out of a desire to maintain the family spirit during the holiday season. But deep down, she knew it wasn't a concession, it was a tactic. She put out the fire to let it burn stronger when the time was right. Ridge exhaled, as if he'd dodged an explosion. Everyone left the room, smiles forced, holiday greetings spoken in distorted tones. Steffi was left standing, staring out the window. The city was bright with lights, but she saw only darkness. She knew she'd tied her own hands, and HFT would be a double-edged sword, either proof of altruism or the spark of disaster. On the other side, Hope returned to her office, sighing in false relief. She knew Steffi had gone under not because she trusted her, but because of Liam. It was that debt that choked her, because she knew that any victory thanks to the man between them would be a dirty victory. But she also knew that time was on her side. The more people doubted her, the more chance she had to prove herself. Ridge, alone in her office, silently looked at the family photo hanging on the wall. He touched each face, then let go, realizing he no longer had the strength to hold them together. He knew this year's holiday season would not bring peace, but the beginning of a long winter where trust and loyalty would be tested. Night fell. Outside, artificial snow began to fall on the square, and inside Forrester, the yellow lights were still on, like 1,000 eyes watching for secrets yet to be revealed. Steffi stood before the mirror, looking at herself, her lips pressed together. In the mirror, she saw Hope in the distance, reflected in the glass, bent over her desk. Two women, two families, two fires, in the same space, but only waiting for the chance to burn each other. And as the clock chimed midnight, the room seemed to tremble under the pressure of what had not been said. A holiday season was coming, but for Forrester, it was not a season of reunion, it was a season of bloody decisions. Ridge walked past the flickering lights of the large Christmas tree in the middle of the lobby, stopping to look up to the second floor, where Steffi and Hope were walking in opposite directions. He knew that the next time they met in the conference room, there